Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Gasworld webinars with me, Rob Cockerill. We're back and ready to dive into all things digital once more with part 2 of our Digitization in Industrial Gases series. As we explained in part 1, this is a topic so diverse and with so many strands of discussion that it's sometimes difficult to know where to begin. We started with 3 areas in focus: IIoT developments, digitization in gas analysis, and the ongoing rise of B2B e-commerce. Today, as we pick up the baton with part 2 of that discussion, sponsored by CO2Meter, we welcome 3 more guests to the show to delve even deeper. Joining me today are Dave Vines of Pulsar Sensors, David Scher of Computers Unlimited, and Josh Pringle of CO2Meter. And in just a few moments, we'll get underway with Josh.
In the design and manufacturing of gas detection and monitoring devices that are highly accurate and cost-effective. Our mission is to provide best-in-class gas detection, monitoring, and analysis solutions while ensuring the safety, education, and long-term business of our partners in restaurant, beverage, agriculture, indoor air quality, scientific, and safety applications worldwide. To learn more about CO2Meter and our multiple safety devices, visit us at CO2Meter.com.
As promised, let's turn straight to our first guest, Josh Pringle, Vice President of Business Development and Operations for CO2Meter Inc. CO2Meter designs and manufactures gas detection, monitoring and analytical devices, and Josh himself is recognized internationally as an expert in CO2 monitoring and carbon dioxide gas. He presents more than 24 times per year on the science of CO2, codes and regulations, and monitoring to a variety of industry experts and organizations wanting to upskill and educate. And today, he's here to discuss another, perhaps future-proofed aspect of the CO2 detection business. Josh, last time around, we heard about the impact of digital tech in gas analysis and how we might say this is actually one area of the industry that's quite advanced with integrating digitization. What's your take on this, and how is digitization changing or evolving CO2 detection and monitoring?
Rob, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys today and to be on this panel. I think the best place to start is with an idiom that I think most people are familiar with, and that's the canary in the coal mine. Back in the early pre-1900s, the ability to do gas detection really did rely on the simplicity of putting a small bird into a confined space, such as a coal mine, to detect whether there were hazardous levels of gas. Since then, the advent of new technologies has grown exponentially, but more in the last 20 to 30 years than ever before. And what we're now seeing is a growth in the marketplace, both from the sensing technologies as well as the applications that allow this burgeoning market to continue to grow. But it just doesn't grow up, it grows broad too. So, 50 years ago, there were maybe a couple dozen applications for the gas, and now we're talking about thousands of applications for the gas. So the opportunity to use technology to meet the needs of those customers across such a broad spectrum is critical, not just for us, but the entire market. One of the examples I would give you is if you went back 30 or 40 years, a CO2 sensor, the heartbeat of a device itself, a CO2 sensor was the size of a suitcase and cost maybe $30,000 US. Today, our partners have been able to shrink sensor technology down to the size of almost a thumbnail and less than $100 for that piece of equipment. So the ability to get smaller, but also maintain or improve on accuracy, repeatability, reliability, the long-term life of the sensor, those pieces and growth in that advancement in that technology has really meant a tremendous change in the marketplaces.
Thanks, Josh. And I know you're very much an advocate and in some ways a reference point for a great many people when it comes to CO2 safety. Can I ask, do you see this digitization of detection and monitoring raising the game in safety through accuracy and almost that uniformity of digital and automation?
I think, Dave, if we go back and if you look at other sensing technologies, if you look at electrochemical sensors, for example, one of the pitfalls of using an electrochemical sensor is the need to bump test it on a daily or weekly basis, the need to calibrate it very often, and the short lifespan of the sensor. By using non-dispersive infrared, especially in measuring CO2 or, say, oxygen quenching technologies and oxygen solutions, we're able to build on the accuracy, improve on the reliability and repeatability of the sensor and the device to meet the needs of specific customers. I think one of the pieces that people are clamoring for, especially in the safety world, is for us or the market to be able to launch wireless technologies in safety. And I think with the improvement in communication systems for at home or work IoT devices, we have some significant partnerships with some companies where they're improving on the reliability of the communication protocols. We should see safety devices in the future, near future, that can be wireless. I think you'll see those first in markets where life safety is not critical. You'll see those in indoor air quality, in indoor agriculture, those types of markets first. There will likely be a resistance from governments and the fire code people, for example. There'll be a resistance to allowing or utilizing wireless communication for safety. They have relied on cabled or wired systems for so long. But I believe what you'll see over the next 5 to 10 years is that transformation into more of that wireless world. It will take years, literally years, if not a decade, to get the code people, building enforcement, those types of folks comfortable with the reliability of wireless technology.
Wow, okay, thanks for that. And I understand you mentioned partners, Josh. I understand we were talking off camera. Perhaps you have something to share with us today.
I think I'm going to provide a little bit of a lead in for my friends at Pulsa. We have been working with the folks at Pulsa for about a year now to find some ways to integrate the monitoring piece of safety into the telemetry side. And I think Dave will touch on that. But yeah, we're happy to do a little bit of a breaking news for the folks at Gasworld to give them a little bit of a preview. Still in its infancy stages, we're just working out the technology pieces, but we're excited to be able to go down this road with the guys at Pulsa.
Well, you heard it here, viewers. You heard it here first, I should say. Dave Vines, CEO and co-founder of Pulsar. Can we just ask you for some comment on that a second?
Yeah. A couple of months, we're going to launch a family of products, and you can think of any device that has an analog or even a digital output. You'll be able to get online very quickly. It's the same plug and play style of our other products. Installation and setup is, should be 5 to 10 minutes. And then you can start digitizing all of those values. And so I think the first step, as Josh mentioned, it won't be a completely wireless system. It'll be more of logging the data over time so that you have a record, and that you can have reports on it. You can alert people in remote locations about what's happening. Obviously, the wired monitors on site will have strobes and audio. And so the people there will still be safe because they'll still have the same mechanisms of alert. But yeah, we're very excited about this product. And really, Josh and his team has been fantastic. The way we build our products is we listen to our customers and our partners, and they say, this is what we think represents a large opportunity. And so we're very excited to launch that. And
that's great.
I'd say in general, it's a very exciting time to be in hardware, and with the technology supporting hardware, connected devices are digitizing the physical world, and hardware is really that enabler. And so if you're familiar with that Gartner hype cycle, with IoT, we're past that big bump of inflated expectations and then the resulting hangover because a lot of these promises didn't come true. Basically, we've been around the block and we know what doesn't work. But we are also starting to see a lot of things that do work. There are many connected device companies now that are proving this, and that are worth billions of dollars. And there's really these three evolutions that have enabled this, the rise of IoT. There's the power of software, which is amazing. There's mobile devices. And then this latest development, which Josh touched on, is low-cost wireless communication. The price of wireless communication, or really a radio frequency modem, is now around $5 or less at a medium scale. The lower the cost of a connected device, the more places it makes sense to install. And we've seen an example of this before. When cell phones first launched, they were so expensive that only a small percentage of people could use them. But as the cost of cell phones dropped, literally everyone in the world was able to use them. And the coolest part about that was that the value a cell phone could provide exponentially increased as more and more people started using them. And so we're seeing the same phenomenon now with connected devices. The lower the cost, the more problems they're able to solve. And the most valuable contribution of connected devices, and I think the thing that some of these initial devices got wrong, or not wrong, but the most significant thing are these new structured data sets that the devices generate from the physical world. And this is so significant because structured data is what software runs on. Now we're able to apply the power of software to the physical world problems because we have the data that describe them. And we have the mobile devices with apps to communicate that near real-time information to the people who supply and maintain the world and really make it run. And so it's essentially a superpower for these people, helping them do their jobs better and backing them up with a second set of eyes. And we're really just scratching the surface. What we're seeing is there's almost an unlimited opportunity in the market. If we only think about operations and distribution, the two most important goals are uptime and efficiency. And so think about how much better uptime and efficiency could be if you're able to monitor every point in your process, and know immediately when something goes wrong, understand if it was anomalous or if it was an existing pattern, and then use that data to learn about each failure and use software to predict the next failure if it follows a pattern to completely avoid a failure. And so, this is happening now. It's no longer this, it will happen, it's happening now. And it's accelerating because the cost to value for connected sensors is a no-brainer when you think about how valuable a human's time is. And in the gas industry, there are so many greenfield opportunities we're seeing due to its high cost of service. A truck stop costs between $50 to $100, really, any way you look at it, by the time you consider the truck cost, the driver cost, fuel, and insurance. And so right now we're working with over 100 gas distributors, and we've learned that even the most efficient distributors still make 30 to 50% more stops than necessary. And so if you put that in context, a gas distributor's cost to distribute is generally 40 to 50% of the top line revenue. So that means 15 to 20% of their top line revenue could drop to the bottom line if they made no unnecessary stops. Now, that's not possible. 100% efficiency is impossible. But the size of the opportunity is mind-blowing. And I don't think there's really any other opportunity to increase profitability by that magnitude right now. And so, the way you get there is connected devices to generate the structured data, use software to analyze that data, and then use that to optimize your operations. And, I think this, the model is proven and ROI positive for bulk tanks. I think the industry has definitely adopted that. But 90% of a distributor's truck stops are not 2 bulk tanks. And so the reason these connected devices and telemetry has not made it to these other 90% of truck stops is the cost has historically been high, and the products didn't really exist. Like, it wasn't feasible or cost efficient to install a large box on a high pressure cylinder. That has changed in the last 5 years. The telemetry products are much better. The costs are much lower, which are enabling these deployments to a much larger percentage of locations where a truck stops. And so, remember, $50 to $100 per stop, 30 to 50% of stops are unnecessary. That's a massive amount of money that can pay for the sensors, the service, and still provide an undeniable ROI. And, it makes the lives of everyone involved in planning and operations groups better. They move from a heavily reactive operations to proactive intentional decision making, which is just a much better place to be.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Josh. And I'm sure we're going to come back to both of you with some questions later in our Q&A session.
At CO2Meter, we specialize in the design and manufacturing of gas detection and monitoring devices that are highly accurate and cost-effective. Our mission is to provide best-in-class gas detection, monitoring, and analysis solutions while ensuring the safety, education, and long-term business of our partners in restaurant, beverage, agriculture, indoor air quality, scientific, and safety applications worldwide. To learn more about CO2Meter and our multiple safety devices, visit us at CO2Meter.com.
Well, I just said there that we'll hear more from Josh and Dave in our Q&A session. And on that note, before we hear from our next speaker, here's a snippet from our last webinar and our panel's response to the question, what technology or application excites you most in this industry or beyond? What are the most exciting global projects showcasing digitized applications? So let's think about not beyond even our industry. Art, I can see you thinking about that. Let's come to you first. What's the most exciting application?
I'm not sure if it qualifies for exciting, but I think anything that's looking at this leveraging AI. I mean, I think ones that I'm personally involved in are just leveraging just the power of AI and machine learning, right? So there was a chemical manufacturer that implemented I'll just say a digital control system in their factory. And they, it was relatively new, and, they converted all their PLCs to, real-time monitoring. And they were able to actually start gathering data, periodically, less than a second, on a variety of different controllers throughout their plant. They obviously were able to monitor a lot of their raw materials, and they were able to actually predict from their raw material measurements whether they're going to be able to meet their output or their purity for their final products. And they would not have been able to do that without, leveraging advanced analytics to do that. And so, I mean, that's one I was personally involved in, and just seeing the power of advanced analytics. And I think now they run their plant dramatically differently as a result.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks for that case study there, Art. Let's come to you, Stephen. What's the wow factor application for you? Is there one?
We have a great cooperation with Imperial College in the UK. So they have a pilot carbon capture and storage facility, or carbon capture. I think that's the main focus there. So this is a facility that's fully equipped with ABB control system, instrumentation. Sorry, my monitor is about to switch itself off here. Full instrumentation, and then analyzers as well, and all of that communicating back in, like I said, to the control system. But that's been a great way for us to interact with our customers and discuss how they can move forward on their digital journey. So with all of those interactions that we've had, it's been really enlightening for us to learn about customers and their journey. So maybe it's not the biggest, most high profile project, but for us it's been fantastic.
Sure, thank you. That's interesting. We've had two examples there that are perhaps not high profile, like you said, but nonetheless important. Richard, is there one project or technology in this industry or beyond that really excites you?
There are. I've got to be sort of very careful about what I say about some of these ones, but I can say there are some very exciting applications in and around LNG and hydrogen applications. I think that's the most exciting thing that we're sort of working on right now. And without saying too much, technologies, industrial gas usage for purposes that are just completely different, just applications that are so just left field, out of nowhere, but just so ingenious. Those are the ones that are really exciting. And that's it comes back to picking up the phone and speaking to somebody and saying, can we achieve this? But in general, I would say the LNG stuff, the clean energy applications, we've got, customers who are, moving LNG from, the States to, remote islands or remote places in South America, who are turning their, dirty coal burning or oil burning facilities into, clean burning LNG facilities. So I would say that those are the most exciting applications that we're working on.
Sure, thanks, Richard. For me, if anybody's interested, I love seeing the digital twin software and the whole world of virtual and augmented reality and how that can make a big difference. From what I've seen, that looks phenomenal. Well, there we have it. In this somewhat sexy or shiny new world of Industry 4.0 and all of the potential possibilities for our industry, it was perhaps a more subtle but nonetheless powerful application of data that our industry panel immediately cited as the most alluring, there and then in the moment. I thought that was such a good question. We'll also put that to our guests later today. But before then, let's hear from David Scher, President of Computers Unlimited. Computers Unlimited has evolved into a software development leader that delivers truly integrated solutions for the industrial gas and welding supply industry. Its total information management system software is at the forefront of these solutions, and Computers Unlimited has a good integration with another company on the panel today in the shape of Pulsar, as well as other telemetry providers. David, welcome to the webinar. It's great to have you with us. We've heard already about the ways in which sensors and telemetry can create a digital footprint from scheduling through to payment. Perhaps you could share some thoughts with us on how digitization is changing the face of the industry as a whole, from asset control to sales enablement and plant fill operations.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity today, Rob. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. Josh and Dave, great to be able to present alongside you. It's a great question, Rob. I think what we've seen happen, and is this past year that I think accelerated this whole transformation. And really what we looked at is we said, this is really creating the need for a digital infrastructure for distributors. So really this migration to a digital world, the pandemic accelerated that rapidly. So what would have taken probably several years has been compressed down to several months. And so we see that left and right. And probably one really great example is just when we talk about business processes and mobilizing and digitalizing every single business process you have from filling to billing. Okay, so we see just tremendous use in this thing called a smartphone that's connected and integrated, and now it's being applied to various business operations inside the fill plant, for example, where these technologies are used to forecast, schedule, and fill cylinders with a smartphone and an interactive display that's mounted right in the center of the fill plant. So you have this high visibility into the business process, and you are taking the pulse of that business process. You are capturing the digital footprint of that business process, whether it's one step or 100, and it's done electronically. So there is no more paper. So I think with the move to digitalization, it really forced businesses to say, we have to go digital because in many cases, employees were working at home. And so how do you keep people connected and productive? You have to migrate to this new type of a digital infrastructure, so to speak. Another area is if you go outside the fill plant is to the delivery itself, where you can now create a digital footprint with these devices and measure and monitor the entire delivery and the cylinder movement from fill to loading on the truck to making that delivery to the customer or the branch to processing the electronic payment right at the point of delivery. And that all requires, a digital infrastructure, a connected infrastructure. And again, here goes this need to eliminate the paper, but you want to streamline that business process and be able to measure and monitor it. Okay, so The digital footprint is a term that we throw out there a lot that just becomes synonymous with the business process. So activity-based costing. I know Dave had mentioned just a second ago about the high cost of delivery. And so it's critical that you're able to now apply these technologies to look at activity-based costing, service time versus delivery time, distance to the customer. Did you make a delivery? Did you not? And so we've developed systems to measure and monitor all these things at a very granular level, or fill plant productivity, plant production versus the actual usage rate of those cylinders, at a customer sites. And then last, incorporating IoT data, to forecast accurate bulk tank replenishments at the customer site. Okay, so what we like to do is be able to say, let's partner with these leaders and let's integrate their data sources, their IoT data, for example, and give it tremendous value. It's very valuable to begin with. But what we like to do is, how do we even make it more valuable to the distributor, and how do we apply it to a business process? And one area is what we did with our bulk gas manager, for example, where we are bringing in IoT data, into that application to help the downstream process of accurate replenishment. So I think it's it's the digital delivery infrastructure, like we like to say. You apply the smartphone technologies to digitalize the business process and measure and monitor it. So I think now these devices have come down in cost tremendously. I mean, we talk about the high cost of a sensor 30 years ago. Well, think about the high cost of a mobile device 10 years ago, what we call ruggedized devices. They were several $1,000s. Today, they're basically free and they're connected. So it's an exciting time to be a software developer and a software integrator, and play a real vital role in being able to connect the dots here for a true digital infrastructure.
Thanks, David. That's a great and very encouraging assessment of the impact within industry today and indeed tomorrow. It's an incredible journey the industry is on and has been on, and it must fill you with pride that your own father was something of a visionary when he founded Computers Unlimited back in 1978. A lot's changed since then, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, a lot's changed, but if you think about the essential business processes, they don't evolve as quickly. But the technology that you use with those business processes is rapidly changing and evolving. But the business process itself is still a real fundamental. It's well defined. It's now, how do we apply these new technologies to get brand new insights and insights into the business process itself at a lower and lower cost.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks again, David. And thanks to you for watching and posing your questions. I can see a few funneling through already, and we'll get into those in just a few moments.
At CO2Meter, we specialize in the design and manufacturing of gas detection and monitoring devices that are highly accurate and cost-effective. Our mission is to provide best-in-class gas detection, monitoring, and analysis solutions while ensuring the safety, education, and long-term business of our partners in restaurant, beverage, agriculture, indoor air quality, scientific, and safety applications worldwide. To learn more about CO2Meter and our multiple safety devices, visit us at CO2Meter.com.
Welcome back to the final part of our webinar today, our Q&A session. Let's get straight into those questions. I can see we've got a question coming from Ashwani Kumar, and I'll address this to the panel. How does digitization help at the ASU itself? Can it help lower the power costs and the uptime? Who'd like to take that one first? Perhaps we'll come to you, David.
If you look at what we do in the fill plant, for example, with our technology, that's used right at the point of the fill plant. And so what we like to be able to do is say, let's just be smarter. Let's provide tools and technologies so that when it comes to fill plant filling, let's be more efficient. Are we just filling to fill, or are we being very strategic about the filling process to be able to say, we know exactly the quantity we need to fill tomorrow to meet demand, and not more cylinders or fewer cylinders? And so this whole thing about cylinder management becomes really important. There's a scarcity going on with cylinders. We're hearing cylinder manufacturers are buying used and refurbishing them. The price of steel has doubled, I believe. And so the days are gone where I think you can just, buy more and more cylinders and just fill. And so we have to be smarter. I think that's a way to minimize the energy consumption in the fill plant production process by being more strategic about it and being able to forecast with greater accuracy.
Sure, thanks, David. Dave, would you have anything to add to that?
So I'm vaguely familiar with ASU operations. The only thing I could say is that there's definitely companies now such as Augury or Samsara that make condition monitoring devices, so you can monitor rotary equipment and you can understand patterns and predict failures. And so I know with an ASU, one of the biggest problems is downtime, almost to the point where if you're an organization, you almost have to have two ASUs, because if one goes down, you can't afford to not supply your customers with the product. And so I think, again, I'm a huge advocate of connected devices, but using connected devices to monitor the process to make sure it's running efficiently and then predict downtimes and fix them before you have failures.
Okay, and let's strip this back when we turn to you, Josh. Is there an important application in or around the ASU when it comes to CO2 monitoring?
Well, I think it's gas overall, Rob. Certainly I can speak directly to the CO2 piece or oxygen or ammonia, but I think it's gas detection overall. What you've seen in the last 30 years, especially at the ASU site, is the ability to deliver smaller, more rugged sensing technologies into the exact precise locations they need to be placed. Years ago, it was very difficult to get that monitoring technology in the right places at the ASU sites. So what you've seen today, maybe over the last 10 to 15 years, is the ability to put the sensing technologies in the right places. But then also, because of the the advancement in technology to be able to shrink the sensor sizes down, you've now been able to also create devices that can be connected for personal monitoring as well. So to be able to pinpoint, put a sensor or a device directly on an employee so that as they travel throughout the facility, their safety is ensured, and that can be tracked. So I think the advancements in technology have given the two key components at the ASU sites: one, getting sensors in the right places, and two, then protecting people at the personal level.
Okay, that's a great response there, Josh. And if we stay with you for a moment, but go beyond the kind of ASU, what's the biggest application or biggest area for CO2Meter?
I'm not allowed to tell you because that would be giving trade secrets away. No, I would, I think for us, what you've seen, as Dave was mentioning earlier, the pandemic has really helped some people and hurt some people. If you're able to change some of your business practices and make some improvements, that's been big. But I think what you'll see from us in the next 5 years is the continued application of advanced technology. So the best way to explain it to you is we continue to work with our partners creating those sensor technologies that allow us to bring products to market that meet those niche applications. As Dave and the Pulsa team were mentioning, the gas distributor level themselves, or as Dave was mentioning with fill plants, like those things are sort of known quantities at this point. I think the advancements in technology will continue to see people get into niche markets like carbon capture is one of them. You'll be able to get into, as a previous panelist was mentioning, you'll be able to get into markets like hydrogen, because hydrogen then has become understandable. That technology then catches up and meets the need for what folks need in hydrogen. Then there'll be a continued leapfrog effect.
Sure, that's great. Thanks again, Josh. Let's come to another question from our audience now. Trenton Elliott has posed the question to the panel. Can we keep better track of the largest and most valuable assets on the balance sheet with low-cost communication networks? Perhaps that's a question best addressed to Dave and David.
Sure, I can start it off. Probably the best way to achieve that, and this isn't a new technology, it's been around for a long time, and then is by starting with barcoding your assets. Because when you barcode an asset, you now have tremendous traceability and insight. Okay, so and you couple that then with a smartphone, so that as you're moving that cylinder throughout the process, as I mentioned before, from filling to loading it on the the dock to the truck to the customer, you're creating a digital footprint of where it's been, how long it's been in that state, and where did it go next. Okay, so that is just a foolproof way of having tremendous insight into not just cylinder management, but also cylinder intelligence. And we see this happening more and more with the lower cost of the technology coming down, the cellular connectivity increasing in reliability, the advent of 5G coming online now. So it's a question of just building out this infrastructure and deploying it strategically with the right assets at the right time.
Sure, absolutely. And to you, something to add there, Dave?
Yeah, I think David makes a great point. And I think barcodes, QR codes are phenomenal technologies. I mean, we use them on our sensors. I also think that what we'll start to see is, with wireless communication, that same idea of tracking, but become passive. And so, we are working with some customers now to automatically track the movement of cylinders from the fill plant to the truck to the customer, where that, you can transfer custody, you can have all the timestamps of exactly when something has changed hands. And so I think that as things become lower and lower cost, it'll make sense to put some type of passive tracker, in the valve of a cylinder that'll be able to both quantify how much gas is in the cylinder, but then also serve as a tracking device. And so, I'm a huge fan of sharing data. I think that, data shouldn't be siloed. And so that same data, that same workflow, the same way that you use barcodes now to track, I think you'll be able to use this type of data. So this type of data would flow into your ERP and management systems, like TEMS. It'll just be a little less work for the people on the ground using it. And, it'll cover holes that exist today.
Sure, thanks, David. I think that's a really good point about not siloing the data as well. David, I'm going to come back to you just for a moment. Rob Lee is watching and he's asked, do you also track the life of the cylinder in your process? So, for example, not filling an out-of-test cylinder or the wrong product or pressure into a cylinder?
Yeah, yes. So with our methodology, from the second you have purchased that steel and started the barcoding process, you're able to then understand how long it's been in that state, so to speak. How long has it been empty? How long has it been full? What was filled in it? Is there a lot number associated with it? What's the shelf life of the gas inside that particular cylinder of asset? When did it come back into the fill plant after it was delivered? How long did it stay in the fill plant before it was fed through a quality control process? Okay, so that really we call that the full cylinder 360 loop, being able to have that full visibility throughout the life of a cylinder from the second you purchased it to the day that it's met the grave. I guess the good thing is a lot of these things will last decades. So it's an incredible, valuable asset. And having that visibility into the asset with barcoding gives you a lot more understanding of a particular asset of, well, what's the life of this asset? How many times did it turn? Where has it been? What environments did it go in? And so now you have tremendous insight. And this information is just, it's pretty exciting what new discoveries you're going to find out about probably one of your most important assets.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Hopefully that was what you were looking for there, Rob. We've already got some feedback from Trenton, who asked about the low-cost communication networks, and he's very happy with his response. A question here, I'll put this to the whole panel, and it's a continuation of a theme from part one. Ruben Attard makes the observation that these investments in digitizing operations can sometimes be quite significant. Where is the fine line when it becomes financially viable? And are there any kind of small company case studies that the panel could bring to the table here? Perhaps we'll start with you, Dave.
So the question was, at what point does digitizing a workflow become viable?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think I would almost look at it the other way and think of what are the biggest problems that I have with my business? Where am I spending the most money? Where am I losing the most time? And then going to see if a technology exists to help me solve that problem. Instead of saying, hey, we've got this amazing technology. There's never a shortage of amazing technology in the world. And so really I think that everyone that works on a daily basis, they can pinpoint those problems immediately. And so if it involves a human's time, if it involves a truck stop, I think that now the cost and the technology are there. And so in most cases, some type of technology to digitize that part of the process will become financially viable. The other big part is humans. Humans are hard. It's hard to change behavior in humans. And so everything can be on paper look beautiful, but you won't necessarily be able to get buy-in from everyone. And so I think a lot of people overlook that, and that's extremely important, is to really get buy-in from everyone in the organization and find ways to incentivize or bring people along that might be a little resistant to changing the way that they've done business for, in some cases 30, 40 years, and they know that it works. And, changing a business process is a risk.
Well, thanks, Dave. Interestingly, I was just in an interview this morning where somebody spoke about that human factor as well, and almost resistance to change. That's a very topical point. Josh, anything to add here from you about that kind of that viability line?
Yeah, I think there's, I would echo a lot of what Dave mentioned as well. But I think there's also, from our perspective, there's two additional pieces, and that's, one is, what is the cost of not doing the right thing? So, for example, in welding, what's the cost of not knowing the accuracy of the gas you're welding with? There are companies that have said it's up to $2,500 a minute in cost if they have to rip a weld out or cut a weld out and re-weld something. So what's the cost of not knowing, not doing the right thing, not having the information that Dave and Dave have talked about? That's sort of the very customer end, the end use end. For us, on the other end of things, is what's the cost of not meeting an expectation for safety, for example, or what's the cost of not being compliant to a standard that's set by a local, state, or federal government organization? That cost of compliance is not something that you can get out of. It's something that you have to do. It's a capital investment. You need to be planning for it up front. That's one of the things we work on with our customers and partners is, what's your exposure? Do you actually understand what your exposure is for this issue? And how can we help you solve for that, both in this year and in future years? So it's a two-part thing. What's the cost of not doing or not knowing the information you need to do something correctly? And what's the cost of not doing something from a safety or compliance perspective?
Absolutely. It seems to definitely be a powerful statement there of turning the question around. And I guess it's the same for you, David.
Yeah.
You there, David?
Yeah, sorry, I thought you broke up for a second there. Yeah, the cost of not implementing a solution versus doing it. There's always the cost discussion, right? There's always what is it worth it? And there's more and more case studies and more proof every day that it is. I think you made a really good point about the human element of changing a business process. That is not a trivial process with decades-old habits. But I think what's happening is, like from our point of view, we really try and focus in on the experience of the individual, right? So it's easier and it's more familiar. There's a whole new generation that is coming into every industry with a certain level of expectations about how work works. And I think we have to be very responsive to that. We have to play a balancing act of not losing sight of the tradition of proven business processes, yet we have to be open to evolving ways of interacting. And that comes down like for us with the software capabilities and the user experience. And it's so much different today because now you have devices and form factors. When we started in business 40 years ago, it was a character-based screen, and it wasn't very interactive. So we have to just evolve with the times, and that's what we've been doing for 40 years.
Sure. Well, it's certainly a question of can you really do without it, I guess. We've got a question from Art Anderson, who was actually one of our panelists in part one of this series. It's a question for Dave. Actually, I think it might be for David, in terms of filling to billing. Art asks, what are your thoughts, insights, and examples of digital solutions that can be implemented to enable sales and marketing processes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that can be very challenging when you talk about sales and marketing. Ultimately, or you have to incorporate what we call product content knowledge, right? You need to equip your sales force with that very valuable information. And what we're seeing more and more for sales and marketing is it's so important to have a good commerce solution to your organization. That first and foremost is addressing your B2B offering, meaning your connection with your customers, but also potentially with the broader market. When it comes to Salesforce, there's many solutions on the market. We have one, and there's many third parties that others use. The commonality, though, is you do have to make sure that you are capturing and having that surfacing that customer information as easy as possible. Okay, but there's that. Then there's also the product content. And, like the product content is an ongoing challenge for the industry. It has been for many, many years. But there's two entities that I think are really going to start to make a change or a big positive impact in the industry. And one is with a company called buying group called IWDC, where they have launched a new PIM catalog, and then another organization called DDS, which is all about sourcing product content. So I think the product content is an important element with sales and marketing, also because a lot of people are now retiring that have been in a sales position in this industry for 3 decades. What happens to their product knowledge? If it doesn't get transferred on, well, then it has to get created in another form and fashion. And I think this is how it's going to get done.
Absolutely. We don't want to see that kind of knowledge siloed in a very different way. I said we get to this question. I'd like to close the webinar with it if possible. So my question for all of you is, what technology or application excites you most in this whole industry transformation, in this industry or beyond? Let's start with you, Josh, as a representative of our sponsor today.
I think it's two things that people need to be aware of. From a CO2 perspective, particularly, or from a sensor perspective, I think one of the things we're most excited about that you'll see developed and rolling out over the next decade is sensor on a chip. The idea of being able to bring the form factor of the sensor down, to put it on a microchip, to work accurately, repeatably, reliably over time. The ability to do that then continues to allow us to microsize devices, which I think is important. As long as that accuracy and reliability is there over time. But the concept of putting the sensor on a chip has been around for years, but it's really just starting to be sustainable. It's really starting to come to fruition in research and development. The other piece I'd add, Rob, is I think I am confident with the work that we do with research institutions. I'm confident that the work being done at the research level is one of the things that's going to continue to push not only digitization and technology forward, but this industry overall. The continued effort for advancement in those research institutions, their continued need for new, reliable, accurate IoT advanced devices. That's one of the things that continues to push both the advancement in technology as well as in the business spectrum and in the market. So I think folks need to understand that helping to educate those customers, provide them reliable information and content, as well as the devices, software that they need. I think those two factors are extremely important. I think it's something that every business owner, every business person needs to be mindful of to continue to support that and help those efforts move forward.
Great, thanks, Josh. That's a strong message there. David, we'll turn to you. What excites you the most?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of excitement, out there. If we think back, the name of our company, Computers Unlimited, and the name of our software, TIMS, those are really two pillar items that we see more and more value in every day. Computers are getting smaller. They're finding their ways onto every single device. You still have the need for software and integrating processes and information. So I think probably two that bubble to the top. One is because we are collecting so much data every single day, that is going to become a gold mine for what we call artificial intelligence, machine learning languages, applying that technology to that operational data that every single distributor can be capturing today. And the more data they are capturing, the more valuable those types of products become. And so now you go from, okay, here's what my business is doing today, or here's what it did tomorrow. What will it do tomorrow, the next day? Let's do predictive analytics. Let's predict what's the best delivery for tomorrow. So you go from reactive to being proactive to really taking a look into the future with these technologies. So that's probably one. And probably second is, and this is a very dynamic topic of discussion right now, really what it's called crypto or Bitcoin, the blockchain, excuse me, technology. So that whole transaction now, if you can apply, the blockchain to it, can you do smart contracts between a vendor, a distributor, and their customer with gas items, for example? Can you now take payments more efficiently and at a lower transaction cost? And so everyone is looking to say, how do we get that transaction cost down? How do we do it seamlessly? And so I think, the whole idea of electronic payments with newer crypto methods, as well as, the service contract of the cylinder itself, are two areas I think that, we're going to keep an eye on. These things always move slower than you think. I think, Josh, you'd mentioned, or Dave even, it's going to take years for some of these newer technologies to find the way into the organization. And so what you do is you just have to really understand what they are, understand what the trend is, and plan accordingly.
Thanks, David. It's great to see some different responses coming in here. And Dave, is there anything we haven't discussed that you think is particularly exciting?
Yeah, so building on what David mentioned about the structured data sets, I think that really is the future, with the power of software and machine learning and being able to brute force sort through all the data and bring out insights. So I think it's the data sets, but specifically the thing that I'm most excited about is the power consumption of processors and wireless radios, which are kind of the same thing. We're seeing that significantly drop. And I think, power capacity, well, let me back up. I think to get a lot more structured data from the physical world, we have to have wireless sensors. Wireless sensors are limited by the amount of power that they use. Today, we have devices that can last 10 to 15 years. However, they're generally only sending 1 to 2 measurements a day, or they're only connecting 1 to 2 times per day. And so I think as power consumption continues to drop on these components, you'll start to get much higher fidelity data, and you'll start seeing a lot more and understanding what's actually happening. And then you can start getting into energy harvesting where you don't necessarily even need a battery, you need power consumption. And so then you can put out devices that will last for 20, 30 years, and they'll just continue to operate because you won't have to change the battery.
Sure, really great point of view there. That's very interesting too. Well, there we have it, a range of talking points and takeaways from our panel today. And I'm afraid that once again, that's all we have time for. Our thanks once more to our panel, Dave Vines of Pulsar Sensors, David Scher of Computers Unlimited, and Josh Pringle of CO2Meter. During part one of this discussion, we asked, where do we begin when talking about the realm of digitization in industrial gases? It's a many splintered thing, as we've seen again here today, but it's something that we can also get to grips with in earnest. It doesn't have to be a daunting or insurmountable prospect. Here in part two, we've not only heard that sentiment reinforced, but we've learned a bit more about the telemetry side of the supply chain, as well as the critical role of CO2 detection, monitoring and safety, and the changing face of the industry as a whole. I hope we've given you some takeaways for your own journey in digitization, and hope too that the next time we're talking Industry 4.0 here at Gasworld TV, we'll be talking about even more change, even more new technologies emerging, and even more business models evolving. Until then, keep ahead of all developments in digital at gasworld.com, follow our smart series of features in Gasworld magazine, and keep connected across all of our social channels. If you missed any of today's webinar sponsored by CO2Meter, if you still need to catch up on part one, or for any of our wealth of insightful webinars, then you can watch on demand at your leisure and for free at gasworld.tv. We'll see you back here next week for our discussion of all things specialty gases, and watch out for an announcement on a unique one-off webinar coming from Gasworld in the weeks ahead. For now, thanks for watching as always, and goodbye.